Hi everyone. Okay, so now we have our clean battery. We are ready to start getting the salts together and mixing them up and putting together our paste and getting it into the battery. So we have our alum. Quick little blurb on the alum. In an earlier video I had mentioned using aluminum sulfate. It is very, very important that you use proper alum. Potassium aluminum sulfate, and thank you to Tom for bringing this forward. We have taken alum and powdered it into a fine powder. I had originally picked this up as a massive crystal block in the market, and you can see now I've taken it and processed it via mortar and pestle and a little coffee grinder into talcum powder almost. Next one we're using potash, potassium chloride. Same thing. When we originally picked it up, it was a granular powder, has a fairly coarse structure. Processed it down via mortar and pestle and the coffee grinder again, just like the laser hacker video, and we made it into a talcum-like powder. Borax, same thing, we processed it down. This one came as a very fine powder. The borax decahydrate in the bag that I picked up, I have a 25 kilogram bag of it, and it was already fairly finely ground, so I didn't have to do too much with that one. And our last one we're using is Epsom salt. The chemical I have in this particular case is magnesium sulfate heptahydrate. We've got the crystally powder and we've got the finely ground powder. So you will notice now that I have them kind of color coded, and this is going to be the approximate mix that we are using for our battery. It's going to be 2 of the Epsom salt, 2 of the borax, 1 of the potassium chloride, and 1 of the alum. Next, we've got all the salts combined in the bowl, and I'm just kind of mixing them together to make sure they're evenly kind of blended. As like my wife pointed out, it's very, very important to add the water into the salt mix a little bit at a time so you get the right consistency. Stirring. Using bottled water, a little bit at a time. We have them all mixed up. I have it at about the right consistency, maybe a kind of a thin cake batter. And it's just about ready for pouring it into the battery. We're going to use a makeshift funnel. It is what it is. And finally, using a ladle, 1 scoop at a time, we're just going to kind of get it in there, jiggle it in. Sits for a little while, it'll start to harden up, so now when you fill the cells, you don't want to fill them right up to the very top. There's no need. You can kind of see from the camera, I think, the lead and how much of a difference between the top of the plates and the opening on the case. Okay, so we've got the cells filled up, and I'm just doing a quick test. I believe we're going to have to wait overnight, let it charge up, so I'm just doing a quick amp and volt test on this meter, which seems to be a little bit unreliable. The only reason I wanted to use this one over the other one is that it shows amps, but I'm starting to question how accurate the reading on this is for the amps. Either way, it's showing some amperage coming out, 6.44 volts. On my other meter, I was watching it for the last 5 minutes and it's already clicked up a couple of points, so Okay, so we have a cleaned out battery. The acid has been completely neutralized and taken out. You'll note here that I've got the battery in hot water. Today's process, we're going to heat the salts up into a liquid, and we're going to pour them into the battery as a heated liquid rather than doing a saturated solution. Side note, I've noticed that when I heat the salts up, the liquid needs to be really, really thin to pour into the battery properly, and as it touches the lead, it cools very, very fast, which is why I'm heating the battery up today. So we've got our alum, our potassium chloride, we have our Epsom salts or our magnesium sulfate, and our borax. And if you see the bowls, this is our actual ratio that we're going to be using today. 2 of the borax, 2 of the Epsom, 1 of the potassium chloride, and 1 of the alum. And I've combined them, and I'm going to heat them slowly into a really nice thin liquid that's going to be really easy to work with. So as we're heating it, we want to keep it on a low heat, and I'm going to constantly stir it because I found that it'll tend to scorch to the bottom and harden as like a solid on the bottom if it's not constantly stirred. Okay, so heating it up. Now it's no longer a powder, it's starting to become a liquid. No water added here, keep in mind. You can still see it's pretty thick. I'm going to let it heat some more, and as it gets a little bit warmer, it's going to become thinner and thinner and easier to work with. Constantly stirring it, keeping it from scorching on the bottom. Call me the Martha Stewart of batteries. Okay, so we are almost to the point where it's going to be usable. Look, it's really, really thin, hardly sticking to my little spatula. Pours nice. And as it cools, you've got a very kind of narrow window where it starts to harden back up. Okay, here we go, pouring the liquid into the battery. Slowly, slowly, slowly. Let's see what we got. We need to put more in that cell. No, let's leave that for the time being. Let's move on to the next one. Good. And after I'm done, because I'm going to have to do this in a couple of batches due to the size of the pot, I'm going to start from scratch. Means I'm going to cool the pot, I'm going to clean it completely out, and I'm going to start from zero again with the next batch. Because I've had bad luck when you try to use the same pot in series. The stuff that's left, the little bit that will be left on the bottom, will start to harden into a concrete, and it makes the project a pain in the butt. Can you see what we got? Yep, can you move that to the first cell? Let's just top those ones. And the second cell. Let's see what we got. Can I see the cells? Okay, you want to get a shot of that just to show? That is about how full they are. It's not quite to the very top, but it's pretty darned close. Let's just use the last little bit of this stuff up, I guess. Get that one away. Okay, so now we've filled it up. We've finished. All the cells are pretty much there. You can see if you look really, really closely, the material still moves a little bit inside, so it's still kind of warm. The last step in the process is to let it cool. So we're going to let it cool until tomorrow, and then I will hook it up to my voltmeter and see what we get.